Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 4th March 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Now, let's start our today's discussion. This news appears on page number 7. It says Palghar, which is in Maharashtra, to get another seismometer. Now, Palghar and other adjoining areas of Maharashtra has been witnessing a series of low-intensity earthquakes in quick succession, and these low-intensity earthquakes are often referred as earthquake swarms. So, after a series of these low-intensity earthquakes in Maharashtra in quick succession, the National Center of Seismology as well as the Indian Meteorological Department under the Ministry of Earth Sciences have said to install another seismometer in Palghar district of Maharashtra. So, on this note, this topic becomes very important for us to understand from our examination perspective. So, from your prelims perspective, this topic gets covered under general science as well as under Indian geography. And in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 1, specifically under important geophysical phenomena such as earthquakes. Now, Palghar in Maharashtra has often witnessed number of small earthquakes in series and in quick successions, whereas the earthquake on 1st March 2019 was on a bit higher scale as it read 4.3 on the moment magnitude scale. Now, moment magnitude scale measures the size of events in terms of how much energy is released. Now, moment is a physical quantity proportional to slip on the fault, which is then multiplied by area of the fault surface that has slipped. And these moments can be estimated from seismograms. So these moments are captured and then converted into a number which is similar to other earthquake magnitudes, and this is called the moment magnitude. So moment magnitude specifically measures the amount of movement by the rock, that is the distance of movement along a fault or a fracture, and the area of the fault or fracture surface. So basically the moment magnitude specifically measures the amount of movement by the rock, which is the distance of movement along a fault or fracture along with the area of fault or the fracture surface. Thus we can say that moment magnitude scale provides a more accurate scale of describing the earthquake events. Another important point to be noted is that moment magnitudes estimates are about the same as that of Richter magnitudes for small to large earthquakes. However, the moment magnitude gives a clearer picture with respect to magnitude of 8 and above. Now, the moment magnitude was introduced in 1979 by Hanks and Kanamori. So, this is all with respect to the moment magnitude, as it measures the size of events in terms of how much energy is released. So, installation of another seismometer at Palghar by the National Center of Seismology will help in detecting low intensity earthquakes which occurs in quick succession in the area. So another important aspect which needs to be remembered with respect to low intensity earthquakes is that these release energy in small amounts. These low intensity earthquakes may also be accompanied by sound emissions. And further, these low intensity earthquakes are very different from normal earthquakes, as the normal earthquakes occur in the following frequency. First, there is a foreshock having low intensity, followed by the main shock which has high to very high intensity, then again followed by the aftershock having low intensity. Whereas in the low intensity earthquakes, these occur in series and there is emission of very low energy. As these low intensity earthquakes releases energy in small amounts and they occur in series and are also usually very harmless. Now this topic of earthquakes, including the plates as well as the various movement along the plates, have been discussed in detail in the news titled Earthquake Swarms on 10th February 2019 by Baswa sir. So to have a comprehensive understanding of the entire earthquake and the movement of plates, you can always go through the DNS video dated 10th February 2019 titled Earthquake Swarms. What you're going to do on the YouTube is that type Rao's IAS and then in inverted commas type this title Earthquake Swarms. After the search, DNS video dated 10th February 2019 will appear on the screen, and on that, it's the very first news discussed by Baswa sir on that particular date. So, this will help you in finding this particular news with respect to earthquake swarms. So after understanding about moment magnitude and low intensity earthquakes, let us also go through briefly about National Center of Seismology. Now, National Center for Seismology has been set up by bringing all seismology related activities of Indian Meteorological Department, and this functions under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Further, all ongoing activities and projects of Indian Meteorological Department which is related to seismology shall be operated and implemented through the National Center for Seismology. Further, specific research and developmental activities will also be undertaken by the National Center of Seismology. So these can be said to be some of the functions of National Center for Seismology. Important aspect to be remembered from a prelims perspective is that it comes under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. So we understand that this particular news with respect to low intensity earthquakes becomes extremely important for us to understand from our examination point of view. With this, we move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 2. It says, hailstorm kills over 1,000 birds near Pench Reserve. So in this news, let us learn about Pench Tiger Reserve as well as other tiger reserves and national parks situated in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Now UPSC has been asking questions based on these national parks as well as tiger reserves and also with respect to its location. So on this note, it becomes important to know about this Pench Tiger Reserve. From a prelims perspective, it becomes a part of environment, ecology, biodiversity as well as Indian geography. Now, Pench Tiger Reserve, which is also a national park, is located on the southern part of Madhya Pradesh. And this Pench Tiger Reserve is located in the districts of Seoni and Chhindwara. So, both these districts, Seoni and Chhindwara, share its border with Maharashtra. Hence, certain part of this Pench Tiger Reserve also falls in Maharashtra. The Pench National Park has its area segregated into two divisions. First is that of Priyadarshini National Park and the second is that of Mowgli Pench Sanctuary. The Pench National Park has been named after the river Pench, which flows from north to south and roughly divides the park into two equal halves, that is, western part and eastern part. Now, Pench National Park was established as a tiger reserve in the year 1992. The Pench Tiger Reserve is situated in the southern slopes of Satpura Maikal ranges in the central India. And Pench Tiger Reserve is also among the sites notified as Notified Bird Areas of India. So all these facts with respect to Pench Tiger Reserve becomes important to know from our prelims perspective. Now as you can see in this map, there are 6 tiger reserves in the state of Madhya Pradesh. They are Panna Tiger Reserve, Sanjay Dhobri Tiger Reserve, Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, Kanha Tiger Reserve, Pench Tiger Reserve and Satpura Tiger Reserve. And all these 6 tiger reserves are also declared as national parks. And apart from these 6, the other national parks in the state of Madhya Pradesh are Dinosaur National Park, Gugwa National Park, Van Vihar National Park and Madhav National Park. So these are some of the important facts not only with respect to Pench Tiger Reserve but also 6 other tiger reserves in the state of Madhya Pradesh which are also national parks. Now this particular question was asked in the year 2017 of UPSC prelims examination. The question was, from the ecological point of view, which of the following assumes importance in being a good link between the eastern Ghats and the western Ghats? There were 4 options given. So in this, A was the correct answer, that is Sathyamangalam Tiger Reserve. So we understand different questions based on tiger reserves as well as national parks have been asked by UPSC. So in this news, we need to know every aspect with respect to Pench Tiger Reserve. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 5. It says, AP villagers yearn to revive historic temple. Located in Prakasam district, it remains closed after archaeological department took it over for conservation. Now this news mentions about a place known as Motupalli, which was an important port having flourishing trade with the South Asian countries, especially during the medieval period. So in this news analysis, let us understand about the temple along with different styles of architecture with respect to Indian temples. In your prelims examination, this topic gets covered under Indian history as well as in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 1, specifically under Indian heritage and culture. Now as already mentioned about Motupalli, which was an important port through which trade flourished during the medieval times with the Southeast Asian countries. And it is in this place where a historical temple of Veerbhadra Swami was situated, which is a fiery form of Lord Shiva. So excavations taken up by the Archaeological Department of India has led to the unearthing of Chinese ware and copper coins of the Ming dynasty, as well as coins belonging to the Chola era and bronze articles and pottery. So the excavations have led to the unearthing of coins, bronze articles, as well as pottery, and this gives us an indication about the flourishing trade which this part of the country with the South Asian nations. Now, the historic temple of Veerbhadra Swami was constructed during the regime of Cholas and has also some stone inscriptions in Telugu as well as in the Tamil language, along with Panchaloha idols. Another important aspect to be noted is that this historic temple is a Dravidian style architecture temple, and deities of the temple include Bhadrakali, that is ferocious goddess, as well as Nataraj. So these are some of the important aspects with respect to the historical temple of Veerbhadra Swami, which is located in Motupalli. And it becomes important to know about this temple because recently the archaeological department has excavated certain gold coins, bronze as well as pottery, which has given us an indication about the flourishing trade with the South Asian nations. So on this note, let's also understand the importance of Motupalli. Now, this village was mentioned by a very famous Italian merchant, Marco Polo, who visited India in the 13th century. As in his description, this particular place was also referred as Mohanagiripuram. Now, Marco Polo was an Italian traveler who visited the Motupalli port in 1289 AD. So, during the period of 1289 AD, Motupalli port was ruled by the Kakatiya Empress Rudrama Devi, who was ruling Andhra Desa as per some of the archaeologists. So these brief facts becomes important with respect to Motupalli port, and the Motupalli port becomes important also because of the fact that it was visited by Marco Polo, who was an Italian traveler. Now with respect to this temple in Motupalli, we have learned that it is a Dravidian style architecture temple. So on this note, let us understand the different styles of architecture temple in India, that is Nagara style, Dravida style and Vesara style. Now, this fact has been taken from the NCERT books, which states that two broad orders of temples in the country are generally known as Nagara in the north and Dravida in the south, whereas the Vesara style of temples is an independent style created through the selective mix of both Nagara style and the Dravida style. Another important aspect with respect to temple architecture is its various constituents. It says that the basic form of Hindu temple comprises of the following. First, Garbhagriha, that is cave-like sanctum. Second, it talks about an entrance, which is known as Mandapa. Third, it mentions about the Shikhar, which is a mountain-like spire, which can take the shape of curving Shikhar in North India and a pyramidal tower called Viman in the South India. So in the Nagara style, it is referred as Shikhar, and in the Dravida style, it is referred as Viman. And the fourth constituent is the Vahan, that is the mount or vehicle of the temple's main deity, along with a standard pillar or Dhwaj, which is placed axially before the sanctum. So this is a Nagara style of temple, and this is the Dravida style of temple. As you can see, this part forms the Shikhar of the Nagara temple, whereas this part forms the Viman of the Dravida temple. It mentions that unlike the Nagara temple, the Dravida temple is enclosed within a compound wall, and the front wall has an entrance gateway in its center, which is known as the Gopuram. Further, it mentions that the Viman in Tamil Nadu is like a steeped pyramid that rises up geometrically rather than the curving Shikhara of North India. So this is basically the difference between the Nagara style of temple architecture in North India and the Dravida style of temple architecture in the South India. Further, it says that in South Indian temple, the word Shikhar is used only for the crowning element at the top of the temple, which is usually shaped like a small stupika or a octagonal cupola. So as you can see, this becomes the Shikhara in the Dravidian styles, whereas in the Nagara style, this entire area forms the Shikhara in the Nagara style. So these can be said to be some of the basic differences between the Nagara style of temple architecture in North India and Dravida style of temple architecture in the South India. Now based on this particular question was asked in the UPSC of 2012. The question read, the Nagara, Dravida and the Vesara are the 4 options were given. So in this, the correct answer were that 3 main styles of Indian temple architecture. So we see questions based on styles of temple architecture has already been asked in the UPSC prelims examination. So on this note, it becomes important to know about the Nagara style of temple architecture as well as about the Dravida style of temple architecture. The next news appears on page number 14 in the business review section. It says India's electric vehicle success story will ride on adoption of electric two-wheelers will need cheaper lithium ion batteries, increasing charging speed and also improving charging infrastructure. So this article talks about the need for developing an infrastructure for electric vehicles in India starting with the two-wheelers. Now, based on the article, this forms your practice question for means. It says shift to electric vehicles will not only help in reducing air pollution but will also help in gradual development of infrastructure necessary for the operation of electric vehicles in India. Discuss. So, on this note, let us understand the China's success story with respect to electric two wheelers, need for adoption of two wheeler electric vehicles in India, as well as the challenges which may be faced in the adoption of e vehicles. Now, according to the latest Global Electric Vehicle Outlook published by the International Energy Agency, China has around 250 million electric two wheelers with annual sales of roughly around 30 million two wheelers. Now, the sale of electric vehicles in China is considered to be very significant because of the total carbon dioxide emissions saved, 80% was due to China's electric two wheelers alone. So, this is a very significant number with respect to saving of carbon dioxide emissions through the electric vehicles, and considering the fact that 80% was due to China's electric two wheelers. So the success story of China has given India confidence with respect to development of a infrastructure for electric vehicles in India starting with the two wheelers. Now two factors are highlighted for this success story with respect to China. First, these electric two wheelers do not require any registration and hence they are exempted from requiring a driving license. So this exemption from driving license allows a wider range of population to drive these electric bicycles. Another aspect which has also helped in growth of these two-wheeler electric vehicles in China is that the government has placed severe restrictions or limitations on the use of petrol two-wheelers in the city centers. So both these aspects have helped significantly in the growth of electric two-wheelers in China. So on this note, let us also understand the need for adoption of these two-wheeler electric vehicles in India. Now the first and foremost issue is with respect to growing air pollution in the Indian cities. And as we have seen that adoption of these electric two-wheelers in China have helped in curbing a substantial amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Hence, adoption of such electric vehicles in India can also help in reducing air pollution in the country. Further, faster adoption of these electric vehicles in India will also reduce our dependency on oil imports, as most of the vehicles in India are run either on petrol or on diesel. So, faster adoption of electric vehicles in India will also help in reducing our oil imports, and this effectively will lead to a cleaner environment in the atmosphere. Further, it highlights that by adopting such electric vehicles, it can help India in avoiding about 15% of total transport related emission, which will ultimately help in reducing 30% of the particulate matter. Further, the electric scooter is around 4 to 6 times more efficient than a petrol scooter in terms of cost viability. So, even with respect to efficiency, these electric two wheelers are more efficient as compared to their petrol counterpart. Now, these electric vehicles are more effective and efficient because the scooters use regenerative braking, where the energy gets stored back into the battery while deaccelerating. So, when brakes are applied, it results in regenerative braking, which helps in storing energy back into the battery. So, it is also very fuel efficient in that way. Further, sale of more electric vehicles will also help in generating fresh demand for more electricity through the development of proper infrastructure for such electric vehicles. And this renewed demands in the power sector will also help to improve their financial viability of the power sector, which is already stressed. So, sale of these electric vehicles will also, in a way, help in creating new demand for electricity. So, these can be said to be some of the reasons for which why we need to adopt two-wheeler electric vehicles in India. However, there are certain challenges with respect to adoption of these two-wheeler electric vehicles in India. Let's go through these challenges. So some of the challenges are with respect to higher cost of electric vehicles, lack of necessary charging infrastructure of these electric vehicles, electricity generation, slow charging time of batteries. Now another most significant challenge is with respect to batteries used by such electric vehicles, as the batteries are made up of the following materials, namely nickel, aluminium, cobalt, graphite and lithium, and these materials are very rare. So, with this rare availability of these materials, it may become difficult to make batteries for electric vehicles on a large scale. So, these can be said to be some of the challenges which may be posed with respect to developing a proper infrastructure for electric vehicles in India. So, on this note, this topic becomes extremely important. Now, this topic in your prelims examination becomes a part of general science as well as in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically under technology as well as Indian economy. So, I hope after our discussion, you'll be able to attempt this particular practice question based on electric vehicles. So, we understand that this topic becomes extremely important not only from our prelims perspective but also from our mains point of view. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears in the editorial section on page number 8. It says, Deepening slowdown. Can the RBI's reduction in borrowing cost help check the demand slowdown? Now, this editorial highlights about the slowdown in the third quarter of the GDP with respect to 6.6%. And as for the editorial, it is the lowest GDP in the last 6 quarters. This particular data was released by CSO, that is Central Statistics Organization, where the CSO released the GDP quarterly estimates for the third quarter of financial year 2018-19. Now, as per the estimate of CSO, the slowdown in GDP has been accrued to subdued growth in agriculture, manufacturing, as well as less government expenditure. Further, the CSO has also lowered its projection for the last quarter of financial year to 6.5%. So, on this note, the GDP growth at 7% for the financial year 2018-19 is the slowest in the past 5 years. Now, the slowdown in the economy can be attributed to weak domestic and global demand, along with uncertainties due to ongoing trade war. Now, this topic from your prelims perspective forms a part of Indian economy and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 under issues relating to Indian economy. Now, slowdown in economy can be attributed to weak domestic and global demand, coupled with uncertainties due to ongoing trade war among various nations. Further, the editorial has also mentioned about the subdued growth in agriculture. Further, the editorial has also mentioned about the subdued growth with respect to agriculture and manufacturing. Let's go through them. The editorial categorically mentions that the slowdown in the agriculture sector points primarily towards the present agrarian distress, and this has in turn adversely affected the demand in the economy, which can be said because there has been a decline in private final consumption expenditure. Another important aspect highlighted in the editorial is that GVA at basic prices for 2018-19 from agriculture, forestry and fishing sector is estimated to grow by mere 2.7% as compared to the earlier growth of 5% in 2017-18. So this data highlights the slowdown in the agricultural sector and also represents a growing agrarian distress. And as already mentioned that this has also affected the demand in the economy with respect to Indian agriculture, which has also led to decline in private final consumption expenditure. Now, private final consumption expenditure includes final consumption expenditure of households and non-profit institutions serving households like temples, gurudwaras, mosques, etc. So effectively, the editorial has highlighted about the agrarian distress with respect to the GVA at basic prices for 2018-19. Moving forward to the manufacturing sector. Now, despite slowdown in the manufacturing sector, it is still better as compared to the growth of previous year. It says that the growth in the GVA at basic prices for 2018-19 from the sector is estimated at 8.1% as compared to the growth of 5.9% in 2017-18. Now, despite this figure, the index of industrial production stood at 2.7% in December 2018 as compared to 8.7% in December 2017. So through these statistics, we can say that manufacturing activity has also declined in India. So with respect to way forward, it can be said that there has been a pickup in the investment activity in the third quarter of the financial year. Further, the RBI has recently decided to change its policy stance from calibrated tightening to neutral policy stance and has accordingly cut the repo rate. And this highlights that there could be pickup in the GDP growth momentum in times to come. Now, under calibrated tightening, the rate cuts are off the table for RBI and the RBI will not cut the repo rate. Whereas under the neutral stance of RBI, the policy rates can move either way, that is, it can be increased or even it can be decreased. So, it is in this respect that the RBI has decided to change its policy stance from calibrated tightening to neutral policy stance and has accordingly cut the repo rate. So, this highlights that there could be a pickup in the GDP growth momentum in the economy. However, there are certain risks which still remains both from domestic front as well as from international front. On the domestic front, the government has already exceeded its fiscal deficit target by more than 20%. So this remains a very serious concern for the government with respect to increase in government spending. Whereas on the international front, global uncertainties due to trade war among nations still remains a pressing concern. So we understand that this topic becomes important from our prelims as well as mains point of view with respect to slowing down growth in the Indian economy. Now after our discussion, these forms your practice questions for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. First, it says consider the following statements about moment magnitude scale. First, it measures size of events in terms of amount of energy released. Yes, the statement is correct as we have already discussed. Second, it specifically measures the amount of movement along a fault or a fracture. Yes, the statement is also correct. Now it says which of the following statements given above is are incorrect. None of the statements given above is are incorrect. So in this, D is the correct answer. The second question says, which of the following declared tiger reserves are also a national park? Options are Panna Tiger Reserve, Satpura Tiger Reserve, Kanha Tiger Reserve, and Pench Tiger Reserve. So in this, all of the four tiger reserves are also a declared national park. So in this, D is the correct answer. Now with respect to these two questions, you can also take a pause of 5 seconds. It says, consider the following statements. Temple of Virabhadra Swami in Motupalli is of Dravida style temple architecture. Yes, the statement is correct. Second, Marco Polo, an Italian traveler, visited Motupalli port around 1289 AD. Yes, the statement is also correct as we have discussed earlier. So in this, both the statements are correct. So here C is the correct answer. Moving to practice question number 4, it says, which of the following can be said to be a challenge with respect to having electric vehicles in India? First, lack of necessary infrastructure. Yes. Electricity generation. Yes. Government subsidy. No. Government subsidy will rather help in establishing electric vehicles in India and hence it is not a challenge with respect to having electric vehicles in India. So in this, first and second statements are correct. So here A is the correct answer. With this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Let's move on to the question for the day.